What's up, everybody? This is Bruce, aka Geektacular. You are watching Geektacular.TV. You are watching episode 21 of Instant Gratification. Once again, my name's Bruce, and with me, as always, for 21 episodes and counting, it's a new Geektacular.TV record. Just Nathan. Hype it up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were doing all the work for us.
Snap out of it. Okay. So, episode 21. Do we have good things for people today?
I would say so.
We better.
This could be a controversial show.
This could be a controversial controversial show. We'll see, though.
And it's mostly your fault.
Why is it my fault?
Because of your pick this week. But before we even get into that, let me just say that Instant Gratification is a show where we watch little videos every so often, and we get together and we talk about a video each. And you may have seen this show before where we talked about movies, and occasionally we may do that, but we're sticking to short stuff so you can get your instant gratification a little more instantier.
More instant in your instant.
If we had more room on the screen, we would call it instant gratification, but there's no room.
Yeah, we ran out, so...
Yeah, there's no room.
Just imagine, it's a silent instant right here.
Yes.
Just imagine it being there.
But yes, your video, I would say, this week might, by some, be considered to be a little on the controversial is not the right word. What's the right word?
I don't think it's controversial.
You don't think it's controversial?
I think it's, I don't know, funny.
Well, why don't you tell the folks what it is?
Okay. Well, my pick this week it's actually a clip from a pro wrestling TV show called TNA Impact. It's on Spike. And it is a clip of two wrestlers that I particularly have a fondness for. One of whom is named Eric Young, and the other one is named ODB. Yes. She's quite a lovely lady.
And we've seen both of these folks actually live.
We have.
At an event before.
We went to a TNA house show about a month or two ago, and we saw them both there wrestling. So we have a vested interest in these two, I feel like. But anyway,
okay.
Basically the premise is that they're getting married in a steel cage, and hilarity ensues.
Yes. So I'm trying to make fun, but really I'm not. I mean, I was going to say something about you being horribly sexist for pointing to this video because of all of the underwear that gets, women's lingerie that gets pulled out at various times. But it is equal opportunity, number one. And number two, really it keys into something that especially I think with TNA comes into play in that they really go for the, I don't want to say vaudeville aspect necessarily, but they allow for some humor.
Right.
And not just stupid joke humor, but yeah, it's silly, but everybody's playing along and everybody knows it's silly, and that's why it's fun.
Right.
I think it was an excellent reflection of that mentality.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, mainly people who, aren't involved or don't care or don't watch professional wrestling, I think a lot of people imagine it being like a bunch of delusional, like, big guys who are all serious about everything,
right.
Even though, it's kind of scripted and all that. So I think people assume that, it's a big delusion that all these people have. And they know the secret that it's not all real. I
think the WWE has a lot to do with that, and past promotions have had a lot to do with that. But honestly, if you look at the history of especially small promotions and independent promotions, so much of that stuff is done with a wink and a
Right.
smile, Like, okay, we're all in on it, so we're having a good time. But I mean, it's one of the things when people compare pro wrestling and MMA, it bothers me because they're not the same thing. Yes, they both require athleticism, but at its core, pro wrestling is a storytelling medium.
Right.
I mean, that's what it's really about, and it's storytelling a lot of time using their bodies or using the using the form of a wrestling match. But it's not wrestling in the sport of wrestling
In the
sense.
Greco-Roman
Yeah, in the
sense.
Greco-Roman sense or in any of those, It's not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or anything like that. I mean, it's just not. And it's not supposed to be.
Right.
Very few of those guys would ever claim to be. They may want to do both. And certainly there are some folks who have done it with varying degrees of success. Again, that's a whole other show. But but yeah, I mean, I think this highlighted the stuff that can be really fun about pro wrestling if you just know that everybody's in on the joke and you just roll with it.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was an excellent representation of that, and it's just a good time. It's a funny few minutes
Oh
to
yeah.
watch, and it's almost so ridiculous that like you just even if you don't like that kind of stuff, you kind of have to laugh. I mean,
And they are very good in those roles
right.
as the guys who maybe you're a serious fan, but they're gonna make you smile, they're gonna make you giggle, they're gonna make you laugh, no matter what. And
Right.
they try in the house show. They certainly did that too. They did all sorts of stuff to try to get a rise out of the audience, and that was the point. So good on them. I hope that whatever storyline this takes them through goes well.
I don't
Looks
know.
like there's probably some more mixed tag team matches in their future, and those are always fun.
I fear at some point Trouble in Paradise will enter, but
Well, of course.
we shall see.
Of course.
So your video for the week, totally different, but still
Could not be
cool.
more different, maybe.
But it's still neat. It's still about it's kind of a subculture,
Yeah,
sort of like
definitely.
wrestling is kind of a subculture. So
So have you ever, I'm going to move my camera here, excuse me. Let's readjust here. Have you, what? It's fine, relax. Have you ever had a website that you come across that you didn't really know what to do with and it would just sit like in a tab for days and days and days and you wouldn't really know why it was there, but you were just fascinated by it for some reason?
I'm sure I have. I'm
Okay,
sure I
so
have.
this has definitely been the case with me with this particular website, and part of it was because of the name. It was called Final Fashion, which is a
Ooh.
great name, and not necessarily for the fashion part, just I like the sort of geeky reference to it. But it's finalfashion.ca, and it's sort of fashion trends, not so much about individual articles of clothing or anything like that. I can't say that I myself am a gigantic fashion geek or anything, but there are aspects of it that are certainly interesting, just like any cultural thing. Uh, the thing that was interesting to me about this is a trailer for a documentary called Beijing Punk. And Beijing Punk is about, not surprisingly, the Chinese punk rock scene, especially that of Beijing. The interesting part to me, or a few interesting parts to me about this, but one was just I thought the trailer was really well done. The documentary looks fascinating. But there's an article that goes along with it that we're going to link to that was sort of a Q&A with the director. And it was interesting to hear about his take on how punk in China was interpreted differently than punk in America, both in the music and the politics and the actual look, because of course in punk, um, the look, or the fashion, or not necessarily fashion's the wrong word there, but the appearance made a difference because you were specifically sort of excluding yourself from particular facets of society, and that's part of it that's especially strong in China. The look of punk over there is extreme to the point where it seemed like they were saying, they wouldn't almost be acknowledged in that role, like they would just disappear. Um, So there were a lot of aspects of it that I found interesting, but I think just the idea of this sort of culture or this movement sort of being interpreted in a completely different way in a different country, um, definitely something interesting and something I thought you might find interesting as well.
Yeah, I thought it was really neat. I'd seen I've seen a few things about like the like Japanese punk scene because
Hmm.
punk has a really big subculture in Japan. But it was interesting to read and to see the director's point of view in this because in Japan I feel like he kind of hints on this referring to the Western punk scene and like the European punk scene and stuff like that. But the Japanese one is a little bit more like fashion driven and things like that.
Hmm.
Whereas in some ways, at least I think he brings it up at one point that the scene in China can't necessarily be that, and that it's not necessarily focused as much around that as it is more around like lifestyle sort of things versus kind of the punk fashion thing that is that creates one of the core principles in a lot of regions, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a definite balancing act because being overtly political, of course, has its issues, and
Right.
so they seem to. I mean, and having not watched the documentary, just watched the trailer and read the article, it seems like that they sort of toe that line or they express it in ways that maybe aren't overt, but if you're reading into it or you know about the history of it elsewhere, maybe it feeds into that as well.
Right. Yeah, it definitely I think I think it's a good demonstration of how something like, the punk rock mentality can sort of that it's not just something that is like transplanted from one group of people to another. That instead of something that comes externally and implants itself in a society, it's actually something that kind of comes from the bottom up. It is generated by groups of people, and it is generated in a way that fits where they are and what their situation is, and not necessarily just a whole bunch of punk rockers who live in China.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly don't think it's punk. It's only punk. I mean, I think that
Oh
there's
yeah.
lots of sort of countercultural or anti-cultural or whatever you want to call it movements that have an appeal to a lot of different groups of people, and they all kind of tie themselves to it. I mean, punk certainly has that because you have your skinheads, you have your anti-fascists, you have your, straight edge, you have your all those who sort of fly similar flags. But but yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting to see it interpreted in a different way, um, and to see it from a not just a fashion blogger's perspective, but from someone who is sort of a trend watcher, sort of looking at the cultural movement of it. That aspect of it's interesting to me for sure.
Yeah, I would be kind of interested in seeing it. I don't think it's I think it's going around the festival circuit right now, so I don't think it's actually available anywhere
Yeah, I'm
accessible.
hoping they throw it online at some point, even if it's VOD or something.
Hmm.
That might be worth a purchase or a rental or whatever
One
to go to
other
watch.
thing before we go that I thought was funny with it is that is the fact that he passed the movie off as a comedy
Mm,
to get it past Chinese censors.
yeah.
That was funny. I had not even thought about the Chinese film censor system at all when it
Yeah, I
comes to
mean,
making a
unless you're recording it
documentary.
like I am right now, on your phone or
Right.
something, you probably are going to need to have some clearances.
Yeah, I thought that was really funny that he kind of I don't know if the whole movie's sort of mixed kind of like a comedy or like if there's just a lot of funny
Well,
parts as if it were a comedy.
or it may just be that that's how they got the footage out, and
Right.
then they cut it however they wanted to.
I thought that was a really funny aspect that I hadn't even thought about until he mentioned it. So now I'm really interested in seeing what the heck it even watches like. It'll be interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So good stuff to watch this episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And like we said, you can get the links down below in the description, and in the annotations earlier when we introduced each one. And
Be our internet friends all sorts of ways. Tweet us videos you might like. We will maybe try to tweet out the videos that we show, or we talk about rather. And yeah, let us know what we can do for you, the people.
And yeah, if you guys have any suggestions for videos that you want us to do on IG, send it to us on Twitter, leave it on our Facebook wall, anything like that. We love to take requests, so you
There you
never
go.
know.
Yep.
And yeah, thanks for tuning in to episode 21 of Instant Gratification on Geektacular.TV, and we'll see you next time. You'll never get tired of this music.